Our followers on Insta have ranked the best of mono white, then followed it with blue. Now it's time to look at the top 10 best mono black commanders in MTG 2023 update. Starting off at number 10 we have Aeryara, first of Locthwain. Starting with my favourite on this list, originally released in 2019's Throne of Eldraine, when Aeryara or another black creature ETBs under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You can tap and sack another black creature to draw a card. For these Aeryara decks we're going creature heavy, whether it's creatures themselves or other cards to get us more creatures onto the board. They'll be entering every which way to keep Aeryara triggering and hit for some big opponent draining. Pair this off with the many black cards or creatures that will trigger to drain our opponents further. When those creatures die, you could be winning games in no time at all. Finally, with a variety of big finisher cards at your disposal, such as Plague of Vermin, you'll soon have a deck that becomes a target as soon as the game starts, because your enemies know you'll be going life gain crazy. But we shall never see another Aeryara after her demise during New Phyrexia's invasion of the multiverse. RIP, my queen.
I miss you already!
I miss you too!
Before we get on to number 9, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe down below for all things MTG. Subscribing is completely free to do, and it helps our channel grow and grow as we head towards 5,000 subscribers. Another way to help support the channel is by signing up to Card Market and using our code gathering-the-magic when you join up. Shout out to Aragon for using our code. You love to see it. Next on the list we have Shieldred, Shizo's Caretaker. Originally printed in 2005's Betrayers of Kamigawa, this spirit says whenever a creature with power 1 or less is put into your graveyard from play, you may return that creature card to play under your control at the end of turn, if Shieldred is still in play. Aristocrats is the way to go here. We're playing a load of creatures, especially those that love to hit the graveyard, so they can remove other creatures, draw us cards and everything else, and then return later on thanks to Shieldred's ability. The keywording here is if Shieldred is still on the field, so we need to throw in all of those cards that not only protect Shieldred from removal, but also those classics like Kai's Ghost Form that will bring Shieldred right back to us. Lastly, Black has plenty of graveyard loving enchantments, so with all of those at your disposal, if you have a hot start to your EDH game, you could become hard to deal with very quickly. A great commander, and this spirit will easily send everyone to the spirit realm.
Yu-Gi-Oh! You ever heard of Yu-Gi-Oh?
In as the 8th best mono black commander we have Sir Conrad the Grim. Another originally printed in the best set ever, Throne of Eldraine.
It's the best.
It says whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the field, or a creature leaves the graveyard, Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent. You can also pay to make everyone mill a card. There's almost one universal theme to Conrad decks, and that is mill. Black and mill go hand in hand together like fish and chips. A keyword around since the days of antiquities, this mechanic, now turned keyword, has over 400 cards printed since, with over 20% of those being in our piece of that colour pie. When you add that with mechanics such as Dredge, you could almost have a 100 EDH card deck with all graveyard loving action. Minus those pesky lands of course. And lastly, on the off chance you get close to milling yourself, throw in a few ways to get your graveyard back into your library and victory shall be yours. In at the number 7 on this list we have Braids, Arisen Nightmare. Originally printed in last year's Dominaria United, Braids says at the beginning of your end step you may sack an artifact, creature, enchantment, land or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent that doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. Throwing in plenty of those cards to create you end step sacking fodder is key. We want to have all of those options to have things to sack to force our opponents to do the same. Then having all of those cards that support cards going to the graveyard really ups the synergy. Not only are we triggering Braids, but we could also be drawing cards, creating new creatures or even gaining life. And with Braids allowing you to sack so many different permanent options, there are so many choices for cards that can go in this deck. This is a fantastic commander, and you can really see where they've taken the previously problematic EDH Braids mono black commander and made it playable and strong. Just missing out on the top half we have Tiny Bones, Trinket Thief. Originally printed in 2020's Jumpstart set, this Skelly Rogue says at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent discarded a card this turn, you draw a card and lose a life. You could pay 6 to make each opponent with no cards in hand lose 10 life. We love a deck that explains the strategy. These decks go all out discard. Discard is primarily in the black part of the colour pie, and this plays straight into our hands here. These discard loving cards have primarily been at sorcery speed, which you don't want too many of in a game of EDH. So if you sprinkle in a few of those, as well as various dedicated discard loving creature cards, instants, enchantments and more, will get you those opponents' hands empty in no time at all, and we can trigger Tiny Bones and drain our opponents for 10 life every single time. Lastly, Tiny Bones has one of the best secret lair arts ever made, in my humble opinion. So if you're building a Tiny Bones deck and want to splash out just a little bit of cash, I'd put all that money into your commander. In at number 5 we have Yogmoth, Thran Physician. Originally printed in 2019's Modern Horizons 1, this human cleric gives protection from humans. Pay 1 life and sack a creature to put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. You can pay 2 swamp and discard a card to proliferate. One common theme with Yogmoth is Infect. Use that proliferating option to get your opponents poisoned and proliferate away to half the time it would usually take to infect our opponents out of the game. Of course, one of the most common themes is that aristocrat route. Sack a load of creatures, trigger Yogmoth's second ability, and plenty more. But that is a strategy that gets talked about plenty within Black, so Infect here really is the most fun and dastardly route. Lastly, in a similar vein to proliferating, there are plenty of mono black cards that focus on that -1/-1 wording, so filling a deck to minus your opponent's creatures and clean the board could lead to a very easy way to victory.
It doesn't rhyme.
Missing out on that bronze medal spot, we have Turgrid, God of Fright. Originally printed in 2021's Kaldheim, this menacing god says whenever an opponent sacks a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the field under your control. A devilishly disgusting commander, Turgrid loves that discard. We will throw in every discard option here under the sun. Similar to as we discussed with Tiny Bones, black and discard go hand in hand, so that our discard cards from creatures to enchantments, instants and more, that will mean once Turgrid is out, madness will commence. Once she hits the field, she will absolutely become the target from all of your opponents, so whack in all of that protection to keep her on the board, get your opponents discarding and create a scarily horrific board full of your opponent's cards to get the overwhelming win. This is now a commander that is very reasonably priced, so if you want one disgusting deck, grab Turgrid and be prepared to lose some friends.
I don't think I like you anymore.
In as the third best mono black commander we have Maronora. Originally printed nearly 20 years ago in Champions of Kamigawa, this rat rogue gives all of your rats fear. You can tap and sack a rat to put X11 rat creature tokens into play, where X is the number of rats you control. These decks go all out rat tribal. Rats in MTG date all the way back to Alpha with Plague Rats, and with 80 plus rat cards being nearly entirely in that black colour, this is a deck that fits together easily. And instead of an army of different rats, a lot of Maronoras go all out rat colony. One of these rare cards in Magic where you're allowed more than the normal quantity, you can create a massive colony of rats that get that +1/+0, things will get out of hand super fast, super quick. When we did this list nearly 3 years ago, Maronora was sitting 8th on the list, an incredible commander that seemingly gets more popular as the years go on. Unlike my girl Aeryara, who went from 3rd 3 years ago all the way down to 10th.
Hey, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Runner-up and the second best commander, we have Shieldred the Apocalypse. First printed in last year's Dominaria United set, this death-touching Phyrexian says whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. The most popular theme for Shieldred? Those good old wheels. Although the temptation is strong for us to draw cards and gain life, it is far more fun to make our opponents draw cards and then be quickly drained for plenty of life. And if we get our opponents drawing too many cards, yes, we're giving them some options for removal or key pieces of their deck, but we may then be forcing them to discard come the end of their turn. But of course, if we're feeling friendly, throw in every card draw possible, gain loads of life and live happy on that 100 plus life. The clear favourite of the 3 Shieldreds, and as is the case with most Predators, thanks to their defeat during the invasion of the multiverse, we most likely will never see a new Shieldred card again. And voted as the best mono black commander in MTG, we have Kirik, son of Yogmoth. Originally printed in Commander 2019, this life-linking horror says for each swamp in a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana. Whenever you cast a black spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Kirik. The most popular theme for this life-linking commander? It, of course, is all-out lifelink. We want to throw in all of those life gain cards, The more life we have, then the more we can cheapen the cost of those expensive cards later in the game by paying 2 life instead of that card's mana. And then some of those big cards we can play can be absolutely end game level. One-sided board wipes, big creatures and even more. Similar to Mono Blue, nearly 3 years on, once again Kirik tops the charts, and this time I really can see why. Maybe it's time to take this from my Aeryara deck and make Kirik the new commander of my army. There we have it, that is the top 10 best mono black commanders in MTG. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe down below for all things MTG. Check out our link tree in the description box below for all of our social media and affiliate links. For now though, I'm all tapped out, so I'll see you in the next video.